Hey, it's Shane here, and this is Brian, and we're back as we promised with another episode of Horror Junkies.
Yes, this is the one I was referring to in my last video. This is the one that's going to get us into a little bit of trouble.
Maybe, depending. Some people might watch this and they're too lazy to leave a comment. Some people might. So today we're going to talk about. Last time we talked about torture porn. Today we're going to talk about the modern horror fan, and we're going to explain why we are so annoyed with the modern horror fan. Now, I just want to make sure everyone knows this does not. I'm not talking about everyone because there's cool horror fans out there.
Yeah.
But we're talking about these horror fans that have certain behaviors that we find kind of annoying. Because one, they're pretty immature. Two, it's pretty superficial.
Yeah.
And it's like there's these like fanboy man nerds that are fucking like 50 going on 3. And trust me, I'm a grown child too, but I realize that, like Bruce Campbell's not God. It doesn't matter if I know all the Italian movies from the 70s.
Yeah.
Like, some of this stuff is just nonsense. If people want to, like, you can live your life that way, but I have a right to say I disagree with it. But I'm not going to tell you to change how you live your life. So we're going to get into it. So we got lots of stuff here to talk about. Let's talk about, we talked a little about what the modern horror fan looks like, and we're going to get into this in depth. But we're going to talk right now real quick about the comparison to the past horror fan. What the horror fan looked like in 1980 or 1990. How it was different as opposed to nowadays. The reason for the comparison is because I think that once you see the difference in the comparison, you'll realize that the older school horror fans were much cooler fuckers, in my opinion. So when we talk about the old school horror fan, these guys are women. They're both. Were like the real kind of outsiders. Nowadays, saying you like a horror movie doesn't mean anything. But back in the day, when you said you liked horror movies, people were kind of like offended maybe, or were a little bit more, it was more conservative back then. You could say you're a big horror fan nowadays and it doesn't fucking mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. It just means you like horror movies. But back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, probably I can preface the 70s and 80s more. If you liked horror fans, if you like horror movies, it meant there might be something wrong with you. And I worked with a guy who said, I don't know if I could trust you. You like horror movies. And I go, I don't give a shit if you trust me or not. How about that?
Yeah.
So, so this shirt, Sick of It All, New York Hardcore, kind of tells you exactly how I feel about these fucking people. The old school fans, let's talk about them. What do they look like? How'd they talk? What was their style?
Well, I was going to say, nowadays, too, it's like, since you mentioned it, it's like there's no sacrifice anymore. There's no hardship in being a horror fan.
Well, tell them what that means.
It's just kind of like, being in a way, it's kind of like, it's funny that he's wearing a punk shirt, because it's kind of like, it's not all that different than what being a punk was back in the day. Before punks in and unto themselves became these big leftist pussies. There's your political rant for the day.
And if you think Brian's wrong, fucking just read Maximum Rock and Roll, or read fucking or listen to fucking Green Day talk about leftist politics all day long, or any of these fucking people. They're like, punks are fucking like, I don't care what their political orientation is. Punks have always been political, but not to this extent.
Yeah,
like if you're a punk, you have to have a political affiliation nowadays. It's like, what?
Yeah. Well, it's just that, and it's like they've all become like fucking woke nowadays. And there's your other horror fan analogy, and we're gonna get into woke horror fans later.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
So yeah, it's like I was saying, it's not all that different. It's like back in the day, if you were a horror fan, like being a punk, it's like if you're walking down the street and people saw you dressed a certain way, like if you're wearing like a jean jacket and I don't know, like a Return of the Living Dead shirt or something like that, you might get hassled.
Yeah, yeah.
And believe me, I've actually had this. I've experienced this myself, especially in school. It's like I can't count the number of Fangoria magazines I had confiscated by those damn teachers back in the day. Fucking bitches.
Well, but the old horror fan back in the day, and we're gonna shout out to a name of one of the horror fans that really describes what a horror fan looked like, and we're talking mostly. I guess we should talk about the 80s on up because the 70s, I don't necessarily know what that horror fan looks like, but I probably would like him.
Yeah.
The 80s one was like usually in the metal, like a metalhead, a stoner.
Yeah.
We knew a guy named Pat Reese who liked horror movies. His favorite, I think, was not Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the Toxic Avenger, and he liked Yngwie Malmsteen, and he had
did.
kind of a mullet and a leather jacket, and he was definitely anti-system. And
very much so.
and we don't want to talk about the politics stuff here. I want to try to stay away from that unless we're bashing it in a sense.
Yeah, which we will do when we get to the woke horror fans.
Yeah, but the old school horror fan just had a sort of like, they were partiers, they were or they were weirdos. Some of them were nerds, but they had we had a neighbor named Mike Pickford, and we're going to name drop him because he won't mind. But he liked action movies. He was a big American Ninja fan, but he also liked horror movies. And so there was all different types of people back then. It wasn't like just one type. And you didn't have to have a tattoo or a nose ring like you do nowadays, which is kind of really stupid. So there were all types,
Yeah.
I personally, when I was watching horror movies, I had short hair. I was into athletics. I worked. When I started loving horror, probably around 13, I was into metal. And then as I got older, I got into classic rock and whatever, the music-wise, but I really started liking horror. But I worked at a bakery in the morning, and I did at night I was a JV. I played JV baseball, and the older I got, I was a manager for the basketball team, and I go, with them, or as a manager for the baseball team too. So I was on the road a lot, and then the weekends were my only salvation to get away from the mundane, and that's kind of where the horror started for me. Horror started technically it started when I got in trouble with the law, and I was placed on probation. I was so terrified of getting in trouble or going to jail that I stayed home, and we watched horror movies every weekend, and that's kind of even where it went further for me. But back then the horror was so important because we lived in a small town that it was an escape from the mundane, and it was really kind of a way to live out your kind of sick and twisted fantasies, because you can't go around stabbing people in the neck even though you'd like to. The subconscious might be you would like to, but you won't fucking admit it. You'll just be like, no, I would never want to hurt anybody. But to me, it's whatever. I'm not gonna say you don't, but I can't speak for y'all. But I can say I do to an extent. But I'm not going to go to jail. I don't want to really hurt somebody, even though the thoughts might be there from time to time. Horror was a way to suppress that kind of anger. And Brian, you could speak for yourself.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say my situation was a little different, because later on, when I was like a teenager and stuff like that, I was by myself a lot, and I was basically the odd guy who everybody in town was like, this kid's a serial killer.
Yeah, they did. They did.
This kid's a serial killer. So anyway,
the kid's a pervert. Yeah, all that stuff.
Well, that I am guilty of. But seriously, but when I was a kid, because I was actually watching horror movies from a very young age, it actually, ironically enough, it didn't really seem to be all that weird, because the kids in the neighborhood actually liked horror too. And so it wasn't until I got to school and and started dealing with some of the adults, that I kind of figured out that, there's a lot of people out there that don't like this kind of stuff.
So the horror fan back then, the horror fan back then was a little bit more rebellious. They weren't such swallowers as they are nowadays. Because basically, I was talking to this office manager, she was like one of the office managers at my workplace, and she likes horror movies, but she's incredibly dull. She's got a family, she's fucking married, she's got all these white fucking norms like penciled in, and she's completely miserable. But she loves horror movies because I'm sure they're an outlet for some of the frustration of her life. And plus, she probably likes the adventure in them too. I don't know. I haven't really interviewed this lady. I really shouldn't say too much. But that's what the horror fan looks like nowadays. They're these stale people, and they're so stale and they're so boring that being a horror fan doesn't mean anything. We go to the horror conventions every year, Spooky Empire, and all we see there are these fucking followers, these fucking tattooed neck like nose ring idiots thinking, oh, we're the outsiders and all that. And we'll talk about that more later.
You can't forget the hipster glasses.
Yeah, the hipster glasses, all this stuff, because this now marks the trait of what a horror fan looks like, which is absolute bullshit. Yeah. There's no look for it.
Yeah, and it's definitely become a lot more watered down. Yeah. Just like, again, the punk analogy. In fact, one of the things they actually have in common is there's actually kind of like a sort of extremist bent to it. Mm-hmm. Because, like, back in the day with the punks, you would even have, like, skinheads and stuff like that. And that was the same for horror. It's like you would have a skinhead who'd show up at the conventions, and then, they'd be into, like, Clive Barker or whatever. Yeah. And it's like the horror community, just like the punk community, is trying to, like, weed those guys out. And in a way, I guess you could say that's a good thing, because, whatever. But in a way, that's also a bad thing, because what happens when you do that is you kind of take the danger element out. Yeah. And everything becomes, like, mellow and flat.
Well, like I said, just I want to preface, or I want to go back to one thing and say, the horror fan, the way they looked in the 80s, and how the horror fans can look now, and the looks really don't mean all that much. But the big difference is back then, and what Brian was talking about, is it was kind of like you could get beat up.
Yeah,
yeah. And nowadays you can wear tats and stuff, and no one gives a fuck.
Yeah, and that was, and back in the day too, it was like that even with the horror fans. Yeah. It's like if you showed up at a convention and met like a skinhead there or whatever, and you said the wrong thing, you can get your ass kicked.
So we're going to go into little subgenres here. I wrote them down here in my little book. And we're going to talk about the little subgenre of behavior or personality traits we don't like. Now, I'm going to say this, and we're going to say this again. I don't care if you do it. If you want to live this way and behave this way, you can. Look, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I just find it annoying. And if you think about what I'm saying and you realize just how superficial and immature this stuff really is, and let's just like how much attention do you really need? Really, seriously, folks. Like, if you're doing this stuff, think about how you're acting, and do you really need to act this way? Because it's not even necessary, But we're going to go into it. First of all, we're going to talk about overlooking the obvious. Like, no matter how bad a fucking horror movie is, you'll say you'll like it. And it can get into what we call the Chris Alexander syndrome, which is that asshole from Fangoria, which is basically like saying you like a movie that no one else likes, and you're the only one that appreciates it. You're the only true professional appreciator there is. Now, if you think about that, that's pretty egotistical.
Yeah.
It's pretty self-centered, like at its core, and it's really dumb behavior.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you want to do it, do it. But like, look and think about how you're acting, because it's really dumb.
And you wonder how genuine these people are too. Like getting back to Chris Alexander.
Yeah.
You know, and he's entitled to his opinions. He can actually think this if he wants to. But this thing he said about like John Carpenter, it's like, my favorite John Carpenter movie is Ghost of Mars.
Yeah, I got Ghost of Mars right here.
Yeah, like,
or New Nightmare, the New Nightmare Elm Street bullshit.
Yeah, it's like
Halloween 3.
Yeah, but it's like he's like, my favorite John Carpenter movie is Ghost of Mars, and it's like you read that and it doesn't even come. You read that in a magazine and it doesn't even come off as genuine in the magazine. You read that and you're like, really, Chris? Really?
But the really? Other people,
it's like you're doing the fucking Miz thing, right? Like, really?
but seriously, if you're reading this stuff, if you're reading it, like we used to read like Rue Morgue, and we'd read all these magazines all the time, Fangoria. We'd read this stuff and we would think to ourselves, as they're writing this down or they're saying it out loud, don't they realize just how full of shit they sound, like how immature and self-obsessed they sound? Like, really seriously, you can get enough attention from mommy and daddy that you got to act like you're so important and so special. Like, you have to build yourself up that way. Listen, you're not doing it. No one gives a shit, Chris Alexander, if you like Ghost of Mars or not. Yeah. And you think that doesn't make you special, or that doesn't make you stand out because you like a movie that no one else likes. That is absurd. That's fucking crazy. Yeah. That's crazy behavior. Like, think about what I'm saying. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
And it's like, I don't like to get into opinions because opinions are like assholes. But
yeah.
I mean, I hate to break it to you, Chris, but John Carpenter has made similar films that are better than Ghost of Mars.
And
Assault on Precinct 13.
And hell, Chris, I don't personally have anything against you, so I just want to say I don't have anything personally against you. You're not even going to watch this, but I don't have anything personally against you. I appreciate the fact you are an advocate for horror. I appreciate the fact you do interviews, and I've seen you on like History of Horror. Thank you for doing that. But at the same time, if you sit there and act like you're so special and you're so unique and you got something that no one else got, you got to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Yeah. And you got a fucking family. I mean, seriously. I mean...
And remember what he said. Why are you doing this thing? This is going to be a motif that's going to continue over and over again.
So, yeah, the special horror fan overlooking the obvious. Now, I can like a horror movie, and I know that, like, the ending's shitty, or parts of it are shitty, and I know it, but I still like it. I'm not ignoring that those parts suck. I just like the movie enough where I could forgive the parts that are bad. Yeah. So there's that part to think about. There's all kinds of movies I watch that I know that, like, I guess if you wanted to be a film appreciator, that that there's plenty of bad parts in a lot of movies I like. For example, I just watched a movie called Lost Faith, and it's a shot-on-video movie by Joe Wynkoop. Like, it's pretty crappy made, and it's got really bad fight scenes in it, but fuck, I love that movie. I don't give a shit. I can overlook that because I like the heart of that movie, and I like the sort of sleep. Like the production values are. He does the best he can with what he has, and Wynkoop is a pretty good filmmaker working on real small budgets. So, like, to me, I can overlook the obvious that this stuff's bad, and I'm not one of those persons that likes a movie that's bad good. A movie can be bad, but I still can like bad from the point of view of production merits, but I can still like it. I don't have to like it. And I don't have to dislike it because it's bad.
And that's fine. I mean, it's like, here's what I think we're trying to get at here. Yeah. Is last night I was on YouTube here, and I was watching Boggy Creek 2. And Boggy Creek 2 is a movie a lot of people don't like. And it's a movie that's not really talked about. And I liked that movie, and I was watching it, but I don't sit there and go around patting myself on the back because I was watching Baggy Creek 2. It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, it's yeah.
You
All
know?
right, we gotta get moving. We gotta get moving. Next. Oh man, we hate this subgenre of the new horror fan. The fucking expert. Yeah, that's right. This is the person who has to know all the directors, all of the and all their movies, and all the fucking actors, and all their roles, and all the fucking movie labels, and all the fucking years these movies are made. And you know what? It's good to know from a practical point of view if you're going to do something with it. Like if you're going to, like a guy who wrote Analog Nightmares, the guy who wrote that book, it would be good to know the dates on these movies and the directors because you're going to make a book for it. But to have this general information, that's fine to have the general information. But really, why do you need that information so bad?
Yeah, and I mean, it's good to have some of the information too. Like it's good, I guess, to know labels and directors and stuff like that. If you're a collector,
Yeah,
you know, it's
fair
like
enough.
it's like if you want to get all the like the George Romero movies, or at least all the George Romero movies you like, it might, you know, be helpful to know his filmography. But some of these things they get so anal about, like year. It's like I don't know what the point is knowing that. Like, what good knowing Aliens came out in 1986?
Like,
I don't know what good that's going to be.
like the Hammer movies. Like the Hammer movies are a good example. Like all these people know all these different Hammer actors and actresses, and then all the different roles they know. Now, sometimes, like I said, it's useful for like Scary Monsters magazine. You're collecting data and you're trying to inform the writer so they have some knowledge of something. There's nothing wrong with knowing this stuff. But I think the problem is people, when they're doing it on their own, are doing it for kind of like egotistical and superficial reasons. It's like, I'm smart, I know this. It's like, who gives a fuck?
In these fandoms, for some reason, there's a lot of ego involved. And I just never really got into that whole thing, man. Because it's like, even when I was younger, and I was a much bigger asshole than I am now. I know, hard to believe. But even when I was younger, I wasn't into this whole thing of like, I know more than you. Because actually, you know, not being an egotistical fucker or anything.
He used to know shit. Yeah.
But back in Cadillac, back in the day, because we come from Michigan, but back in Cadillac, Michigan, which is a small pond, you know,
no one could touch him.
I probably knew more than most, if not all, people up there. But you know what?
Who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah.
And that was even my attitude on it back then. Is who gives a shit?
All right, so next we're going to go to the fucking film critic, and these people can suck my balls. These people are the people that do their top 25 horror movies on 2023 or 2022, and they describe movies as in the movies had important themes of isolation and alienation. And they'll go on and talk about themes, and they'll go on and talk about this intellectual pursuit of the movie and that one. And really, what they can explain, the most important thing to explain to somebody is how the movie make you fucking feel. Were you excited about it? Were you entertained by it? Did it make you think even? And if it made you think, what did it make you think of? And then if you want to pursue the intellectual stuff that way, that's fine. It made me think about death. It made me think about this. The themes made me think about this. But just to say, oh, this movie's got themes, who gives a shit if it's got themes or not? If it's not important to your life, then what difference does it make if you dissect if they're there or not? You know, movies should be personal to me. Like, they shouldn't be... to me, they shouldn't be a passing fancy, but I can't tell somebody how to live their life. For somebody that's a dad or mom and they're busy, 2 hours of fucking, you know, like for my sister's ex-husband, 2 hours of Independence Day is what he needed back in the day. And I used to shit on him about it, but now that I think about it, it's like, that's fucking fine with me. He can have those 2 hours, 2.5 hours to watch Independence Day.
Yeah, he can watch Independence Day. Ray, if you're out there, you can watch Independence Day. Just don't make me watch it with you, buddy.
And these are the people too that start talking about character arcs and start talking about exposition and start talking about this and that and how a movie's framed. And some of the people who actually write the reviews or do reviews have actually been on film sets, so now their ego is blown sky high, where they think they know how a movie's made.
Oh yeah.
And then because they know, because they've seen it, all of a sudden all other movies that don't fit direct criteria based on their experience are trash or whatever they are.
Yeah,
they might like them too. Who knows?
And they talk in that dry tone, like they got a corn cob shoved up their asses, and they sound like they're writing their fucking goddamn student thesis on film theory or whatever. It's like, I got enough of that when I was in school, man. It's like, no.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that more. But let me tell you guys something, okay? For the people who are doing all these reviews and doing all these end-of-year lists, listen to how you're talking about movies. Listen to yourself and listen to your own dialogue about it. Because if you're just doing the standard cliched bullshit, okay, if you're just doing the standard bullshit, then what makes you think any different than anyone else? You're not thinking about it then. How you think different about it is how you feel about it. Yeah. Now, how you feel about it might be the same as somebody else, but it's still yours. Yeah. If you go on and use a bucket list, a standard list, a blueprint of how you're going to review a movie every time, you're going to lose focus of what the movie should mean to you, which is kind of a spontaneous, impulsive response.
Yeah.
Maybe it hits some subconscious or conscious part of your brain, and then you could just pull that up later. But the way people review movies online, like now you see it on YouTube, everyone's a goddamn fucking film critic. Everyone is a film critic, and everyone brings up this tried and true garbage that's just like dumb. Yeah. And they think they sound smart. They think they're fucking so smart, but they're not. Yeah, they're regurgitating somebody else's bullshit.
I was gonna say, and it's all cliche bullshit too. It's like they'll come out there thinking they're really smart, and then they're like, Dawn of the Dead's awesome because it's critique on the culture of shopping and how it zombifies people. It's like, assholes. Critics have been saying that about Dawn of the Dead since the 1970s.
Yeah, Roger.
You're not bringing anything new.
Like Roger Ebert said that while you were sucking on your mom's tit. Okay? Come on now. So we're going to actually go the opposite way here. As far as talking about cliched film criticisms, I'm actually going to stick up for cliched, so I guess this might make me sound like a hypocrite, but we're going to go to the old constant complainer. That's right, the fucking one that watches all these horror movies and hates every single fucking one of them and uses excuses like cliched, doesn't bring anything new to the genre. These assholes. These fucking assholes. Like, look, I've done that too, so I'll give you a little bit of a break. I've done that too. It's easy to do. It's lazy is what it is. It's lazy. Because even if a movie, like, if you watch a slasher movie, you take any slasher movie. Let's take you Friday the 13th, and then you watch, let's say, Happy Birthday to Me, okay? There's some similarities in there. It's a slasher. Kids are getting knocked off. There might be differences where in Happy Birthday to Me, it's actually happening in people's homes. It's not on one specific set, like in Friday the 13th. But if you also look at these movies, they also have some differences in tone and suspense and even the way it's being told. So, yeah, the movies can look a whole lot alike and be a hell of a lot different. You know, they don't have to be this, like saying that something doesn't bring something new to the genre. Well, I think anybody that makes a movie, good or bad, there's a certain amount of energy in that's put in the movie. And that energy is really individual. Now, to me, that's an individualized thing. The energy effort a person puts into a movie is very unique to that person. Yeah. And it imprints into the movie, onto the screen. And so to me, if you catch that and pay attention to that can give you enough of a difference to where something else is. Because Sean Cunningham has a different vibe to the way he made Friday the 13th than how fucking John Carpenter made Halloween. They're completely different vibes.
Yeah.
And that has to do with the spirit and the heart of the filmmaker and the people who are, and how they transplant that sort of infectiousness into the movie.
Yeah.
And that's how you can tell the difference, is because every movie's got its own like soul beat or a heartbeat to it, in my opinion. And to me, it's like, that's how I can kind of differentiate it. I don't care that they had the same plot and they had the same, I don't care about that. I look at each movie and try to look at it individually, even if it's in a slasher. I love slashers. Brian will tell you I love slashers. And slashers are all about repetition and predictability. And predictability a lot of the time. You might have to guess who the killer is. But predictability that victims are going to get caught off. Yeah. So we know this, but I don't care. I like them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, even some of the good slashers are really predictable. Like the Prowler, it's like, hey, guess what happens early on in the movie? The sheriff takes off on vacation. I wonder who the killer is.
Yeah. So the complainer is just somebody that's like watches a lot of horror movies, and hell, I've been there too. So I'll be a little light. Yeah. I'll be a little light on the complainer because I've done it too.
Yeah.
Until I realize that I sound like an asshole when I'm complaining all the time. Can I make a better movie than some of these people are making? Probably not. So why am I going to sit here and shit on their fucking their hard-made product,
and that's another thing about making movies. Put up or shut up.
Yeah, and we've made movies, and they're fucking hard. The movies are fucking hard to make. They're not easy to make.
And it's like, I get it to an extent. It's like, some filmmakers, I think, don't put a lot of themselves into a movie, I guess, and some of them will just rip off like whatever they like. And if you want to tear those movies apart, I sort of get it, It's like, because even I've done that. I think we've all done that, where you're watching a movie and like let's say the killer animal movies, right? It's like you're watching, like, say, a killer shark film, and the movie's like so bad, so derivative, you think to yourself, well, fuck, why am I watching this movie when I could be watching Jaws?
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Let's move on. We got a lot left to go through. The horror movie snob.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's right. These bastards. And I Mike Rosenbaum is the guy from Smallville. He has this hat that says only good horror movie, or only good 80s horror, or horror movies that are only good. And it's like, and I was talking to Brian about it, it's like, because he's used to being on really nice sets. And he's used to having kind of maybe he's been on shitty sets too. I don't know his whole discography. But he's got this idea that there should be some hierarchy, that a horror movie should be good all the time. And no movie's good all the time. Okay, no. Anyways. There's no such thing as a perfect film, so, in my opinion. So that stuff's stupid to me when you start getting down to that thing. But then you got these assholes, too, who think that anything that's shot on video is not a movie. We know a guy who has his own store, and sorry, I'm getting out of frame. There's my bad filmmaking right there. Yeah. But he's a guy who said that movies that are shot on video and not shot on real camera are not real movies. And that's his opinion, and he's fine to say that. To me, that's absolute bullshit. If you put a camera in front of something, it could be a movie. But that's my disagreement with him.
Yeah, you're right about that. And like, I don't really get, like I was saying to you earlier, why people are so nerd nowadays with like production values. It's like, I don't like the production values on this, and it's like, how many Hollywood movies have you seen? And there's a lot of them, believe me, where they have good production values, but they fucking suck.
Yeah. So, the movie snob, only wants these good horror movies. He doesn't like the lower budget stuff or like what would be called bad horror movies. But let me tell you something. These are the same people, I want to believe, anyways, that sat there and shat on fucking Event Horizon in the 90s and now are saying it's underrated. Yeah, Event Horizon. That movie blew. I remember seeing it in the theater. And now all of a sudden you got this revivalist mentality amongst these fucking superior people that decide to give... if they give a movie a chance, that means everyone should give it a chance. And now Event Horizon was going, at least for a few years ago, was going for a shit ton of money to buy. And it's a fucking, like, Goodwill movie for $2. Somebody fucking released on Arrow or something. One of those companies, and now the movie's going for a little bit more money, unless you can film the old pressing of it.
Oh, jeez. And that's almost a future video we should do, by the way.
Yeah.
Horror collecting, and why this modern era isn't the golden age of collecting that everybody thinks it is. But that's neither here nor there.
So the horror movie snob is the person that, and it's almost like, it's really kind of funny in a way, because horror movies are kind of shed on by critics, but then you got people who think, oh no, there's great horror movies, and then everything else is below because it doesn't.
Oh,
look,
God. It's like basically nowadays, right, with all this fucking post-horror fucking garbage.
Which we're going to bring in next, yeah.
Fucking, you got all these people acting like the cast of, like, Scream 5. And that's why it's Babadook rules.
Well, that's what we're going to get into, which is this post-horror nonsense. And here's the thing, and I'm going to actually, as much as I was going to, like, and this goes with the horror snob. So this is more about like an element of the horror snob, which is these people that say stuff like, "Oh, these movies have themes." So fucking what if a movie has a theme in it? Whippy shit. Oh, it makes it more deeper and more thought-provoking. No, it doesn't.
And speaking of which, that really annoying Ortega girl says that in that Scream movie. She's like, Babadook's not schlock. Babadook has themes.
Well, I'll tell you this much. If you watch, I'm not going to... I didn't like that last Scream movie, but I'll just tell you one thing. If you watch that movie, okay? For this girl who's saying this shit in this movie, as the movie's going on, she finds out that her sister lied to her about something in the movie. I can't remember what it was. And
spoilers.
And literally the next scene, she forgives her. Yeah. She acts like it didn't even matter. Like, literally, like, the next scene, it seemed like. I don't remember where it was at. But, so how intellectual is that, bitch?
Yeah.
Fuck you, Jen Ortega. You're not that fucking talented. You're just a... fuck you. Seriously.
And here, I was trying to be the more diplomatic of the two. I was trying not to make it a personal attack.
No, I'm not going to I was going to apologize, but I'm not going to apologize. Fuck her, man.
I'm half kidding. If you like Jen Ortega, you know what? It's like I said earlier. Everybody has a fucking opinion.
Everybody's got an opinion, man. This is my opinion. So I'm sure I'll get a whole bunch of fucking... Or not a whole bunch of comments. I might not get any comments and might get some comments. If you put comments down there and you're just going to sit and attack or what I say or what he says, we're not going to respond because I don't give a shit what you have to say. If you want to say, hey, you made this point, but I'd like to recounter, he might.
I'm going to say I'm the exact opposite. I'm actually one of those weird people.
He likes to fight. I know.
That likes hate mail.
So going back to this post-horror stuff, because we got to actually talk about it. Basically, this is the same thing almost as the horror movie snob, where all of a sudden you have these post-horror movies that are shot real well, that have a sense of artistry to them, and have these themes. I'm sorry, but that's not going to make a movie good. That's not going to make a great horror movie. You think about every great horror movie that's ever been made, from everything from Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Dracula. There might be themes in those movies that you could etch out. Maybe they're as plain as day, but you sure as fuck aren't thinking about the artistry and the intellectualization as much as the fucking visual impact it had on you. So to me, it's like when you start talking about you know, post horror and how intelligent they are and how they have all these themes. It's like, yes, but how visually exciting are these movies? Horror movies are really meant to be impactful. Scenes, certain looks, certain things you kind of grimace or you laugh or you fucking whatever. They're supposed to be impactful. When you watch post horror stuff, you're bored. You're like, fucking, come on, man, what?
Yeah, I was gonna just say it's like with that, and I know that there's like people who like this movie and whatever, but it's like when Jim Mickle made
Stakeland,
that We Are What We Are movie, it's like, wow, congratulations. That's a hell of an achievement, buddy. You made a movie that's as exciting as watching paint dry.
That movie.
Good job, buddy.
That movie, like, okay, the original one is way much better, in my opinion.
Yeah, that Mexican one's really good.
Yeah, because it has kind of a quirky life beat to it. It's got kind of a weirdness to it, and it kind of has its own life to it. What Jim Mickle did, Brian's right. He was doing basically a painting that was a movie. And even when he delivers the scenes in the end of the movies, it's bullshit. This girl nibbles on her daddy's shoulder and the other one nibbles on his fucking leg. Whippy fucking shit. Woo. Ooh. Like, I'm like, woo. I remember watching that with him. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is the big denouement? This is the big ending?
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, going back to the critics that will like to criticize the movie too much. I'll actually be I'll be the film criticizer here, because these movies to me are fucking boring. They're so dull and lifeless, and they think what they're making are like intellectual works of art. And I'm sorry, motherfuckers, they're not. They're just dull.
Yeah,
you know, this is my opinion, but I mean that's just my opinion.
I like some artsy horror films, but it's kind of like, I'm sorry, Jim Mickle, but
Jim Mickle.
We Are What We Are is not Herzog's Nosferatu. It just isn't. It's not.
All right. You want to talk a little bit about Facebook trollers and stuff like that?
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I just kind of had a feud going, which I guess you can call a YouTube
celebrity
troller.
A celebrity.
But yeah, it's like, if you saw my moods video, that is kind of like almost like a precursor to this video. And it's kind of like, this is kind of the way, what I'm going to say first and foremost, and this is kind of like a happy accident on my part, because this is not something I planned, but back in the day, because I've had a YouTube account since like the early 2000s, give or take, I just haven't uploaded videos till recently, because I've been back and forth on that because of YouTube's bullshit policies. That's a whole nother thing, though. But, you know, and then, though, you know, it's kind of like, anyway, what I was going to say, so when I signed up to YouTube, I ended up using my own name, and that was just kind of like a happy accident, because nowadays, way too many people kind of use the internet as a way to hide, and a way to be brave, even though they're not brave. You know, so I'm actually happy that I go by the name of Brian Davis.
Well, you know, another thing too is if we're attacking people and they want to say something back, they could say something back online. But if they got a problem with anything that's said and they want us face to face, I'll give you my address. I got no problem beefing with somebody if they got a problem with something I said, because I'm not going to back down from y'all.
Yeah, because that's kind of the way we deal with it back in the day. Back in the 80s, you know, if like in my neighborhood, and I'm not going to make it seem like I grew up in South Central Los Angeles or anything, but my neighborhood, like if a kid had a problem with another kid,
they fought it out.
You would confront that kid, and based on what happened, you would either bury the hatchet, so to speak, or you'd fight. It's, you know, one of the two. And so I don't get all this fucking trolling stuff. And point in fact, that was actually like a big part of my argument with Moods, is because Moods thought it was quote unquote funny that essentially the asshole that directed those new Halloween movies was using, I think it was Halloween Ends, has a way to like troll the Halloween fans. And I was like, no, that's fucking bullshit and that's fucking cowardly. It's like, if he has a problem with Halloween fans, he can actually go to a convention and tell these motherfuckers to their faces that he has a problem with them. But he's like, no, I'm gonna be snarky because I'm a freaking pussy. It's like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and if he's not a Halloween fan, he shouldn't be making the fucking movies, really.
Well, it's like I said in my video. It's like the only reason he made those movies is so he can kiss up to fucking John Carpenter. Because funnily enough, the people who say, and this includes Moods, by the way, that the people who like the Halloween franchise are quote-unquote Halloween fanboys are basically what it comes down to. They're fucking John Carpenter fanboys. They're the kind of people who would drink a vat of poison Kool-Aid if John Carpenter told them to. Because, hey, he created Snake Plissken, right?
They Live, the Wonder Boy movie. All right. So next up, we're gonna try to get through this fast. Next, we're gonna talk about kind of two things that lead at two different kinds of traits: the moralist, only movies go so far, and then the safe fan. And that's right, there are horror fans that are within the window where they can't watch this. I've talked to people that say they're horror fans and then say, "Oh, I can't watch The Exorcist."
Yeah.
What? What?
Yeah.
You know what? Seriously? So the moralist is the one that wants their horror movies to be scary and creepy and maybe even fun, but they don't want them to cross the line. And there was a review in the original. It was a USA Today for the original Saw movie that said, putting a gun to a kid's head in a movie or threatening a kid with a gun in a movie is a cinematic no-no.
No.
And I was thinking it's a cinematic yes. and you know, if people are going to piss their pants over something like that, like, you know, do you really think that the actor kid in real life was traumatized? Really? Do you really think he was? Because he wasn't.
No, yeah.
You know, so give me a fucking break.
It's kind of like in that case, I think that adults really don't understand how much kids both gravitate to and understand that things are make-believe, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of like, you tell a kid, like a kid will watch a movie and he'll get scared, then you tell the kid that it's fake and explain how that it's make-believe, mm-hmm. and they understand that, you know?
Yeah.
Because they make believe a lot of the time anyway.
So going into the moralist is the safe fan, and that's what I was saying. They like some movies, but won't take it so far. Did I put anything else? Yeah, these are like the office manager I was talking about. This real safe, morally quarantined norm follower that fucking likes horror movies as some sort of little escape for her, which I'm glad she has for herself, but is as dull as... Like if you met this woman, y'all, you would realize that she hasn't had a good fuck and probably since grade school, and she's so fucking unhappy. And then maybe the little pockets of fucking escape for her are these horror movies, but she follows the safe line. And this is what she does. She's like, well, yeah, but I don't want it to go too far. I don't want my shitty life, which has gone too far. I want my safe, shitty life to stay. That's already gone too far. That's already went past the point of no return. Yeah. I want that to stay kind of there. But I don't want a movie to show something because it might break my false sense of confidence in my own inner bubble, which is bullshit, which is stupid. And let me tell you something. I believe in, like, there's certain things movies shouldn't show, uh, too. But I'm on the thing of
But
push it as far as fucking
yeah, I was
possible.
gonna say, but those would be things like, things that would be illegal anyway, like actual murder, actual this or that,
Well,
things that you couldn't do. So it's like kind of a moot point,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. If you were to film them anyways, you'd get arrested. But like, so
Yes.
I'm writing the script right now, and in the script is some baby like torture in it. And I was telling this girl at work that, and she's like, "Well, what do you think the producer's gonna think?" Because I'm gonna be meet a producer at some point, talk about the script. And I go, "Well, I don't give a shit what he thinks because I'm not changing anything in the movie. I'm not changing anything in the script. Nothing. And if that means
Yeah.
I don't make a movie in Hollywood, that means I don't make a movie in Hollywood. But I'm not about ready to soften up to what those assholes want. And if they think I'm going to take it out, they're fucking sadly mistaken. And if that means I got to work at Taco Bell the rest of my life because I missed my big break, I missed my big break. Because I'm not going to sell out something because some asshole safe white fucker or whatever. Yeah, because white people are really safe. So that, yeah. But, I'm not going to do that. So fuck
We
that.
refuse to bow down to any corporate sponsor.
So let's talk about the half history fan. Let's talk about these assholes. That's right, the half history whores. Yeah.
Oh wait, one more thing about the moralist. I was gonna throw in another pot shot at Chris Alexander real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Who once said, and I quote, he was talking about Freddy Krueger, and he said, and I quote, "I don't think a child murderer should be on the front of a lunchbox." And this is the same, and it's so weird because it's like back in the '80s, it was like Roger Ebert would say stuff about horror films and how offensive they are and how they should be banned and all this shit, and people would get pissed about it, and I think rightly so. But nowadays we get horror fans that sound like Ebert, like him, right?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah. Back then, the horror fans would be like, more of it. Let's see more of it. Let's see more child killing. You know, that's what they would say. But nowadays, it's just like, well, we don't want it to go too far. So, like, they're these quasi fans. They're not even, like, really hardcore horror fans, like these quasi ones.
Yeah.
But let's go to half history horror. Okay, that's these assholes. And I'm talking about a lot of these assholes out there. They think horror movies started with either Hammer horror, all the horror movies from the 70s, and lately, all the horror movies from the 80s. That's when horror movies started. Are they missing the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s? And there was some, like, optical movies made in the 1910s. Yes, they're missing these movies. They completely dismiss them. They act like those weren't horror movies because they were shot in black and white. Like, what?
Oh, or they fucking didn't grow up on them.
Or they didn't grow up on them.
Yeah, it's that whole thing. It's like the it only started from when I grew up, because if I didn't grow up on it, it doesn't exist.
Which is like,
It doesn't make any
and
sense.
I guess because so there was two tales for both of us probably growing up. We grew up on 80s horror movies.
Yeah.
And I still watch a lot of 80s horror movies, so does he. And we still love 80s horror movies. We love them as much as anybody else does. We champion them as much as anyone else does. But we also were fed a steady diet of the original Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Creature of the Black Lagoon, the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, the Black Cat. We were fed these movies too. Freaks. And we were fed these. Well, Freaks was a little bit later. I didn't see that when I was a kid. But when I was a kid, the first terrifying image that I remember, like, of a monster that I remember seeing was Frankenstein. I thought the photo of Frankenstein was terrifying when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
When I was a really kid, because his face is death, and I thought that that's what death looked like. Was Frankenstein.
Oh yeah, because
the monster.
Remember, I used to have those old orange, like, those orange and black. I think they were like Crestwood horror books
Yeah.
about the horror movies, and it's like you would read those because we didn't have access to a lot of these movies, but you would read them and they would basically tell you like literally the whole movie. So it was almost like watching the movie, you know. And it's funny when I later on when I ended up watching a lot of these old black and whites in my 20s, I had this like incredible sense of deja vu. And then it dawned on me it's because I had read up on these movies so much and knew so much about them from that it's almost like I'd seen them before, even though I hadn't.
Well, the thing too being, okay, is if you hadn't seen those old movies, that's okay. And if your only reference point is the 80s or 70s, whatever. But the point being is you either lack the understanding that there were movies made before that, or you just don't know.
Yeah.
Okay? Maybe you just don't know. But there are people out there who are supposedly true and tried horror fans that act like these movies didn't start till maybe the 60s into the 70s and the 80s. Okay? Yeah. That's when they think horror movies started. It's ridiculous. There used to be this big Hammer revival where people really thought Dracula started with Horror Dracula. Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? I was just talking to a friend of mine, and she knows I'm like a huge fan of Last House on the Left and The Exorcist and stuff like that. She goes, The Exorcist, that's probably your favorite, right? I go, no. I go, fucking Universal horror movies. Those are my favorites. They're going to be my favorites till I die. They're always going to be my favorite horror movies. Those are the ones I grew up on. Those are the ones that had the biggest impact on me. And those are the ones, to this day, I like watching more than any other horror movies. So I'm not, like, it hadn't changed much in my life that I go back to these movies from the 30s. And it never's gonna.
Yeah.
And those are the movies that, and what happens is, and Brian could talk about his history too here, but what happens is these movies carry over. They don't get old, and to me they carry over. It's like this like soulless form that doesn't die in these movies, and it just kind of carries over every time you watch it. I mean, we just watched Dracula not too long ago, I'd say the last year, and man, that movie still fucking kicks ass. To me, I still love that movie.
Yeah.
We watched Nosferatu, and man, even though it's not a Universal horror movie, movies in that era, I shouldn't say just all Universal, but man, does that pack a punch. Yeah. The Phantom Carriage, boy, does that fucking work for me. Still today, those movies work for me way better than any other movies ever have, for me.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I think to sum this part of it up, it reminds me of this just this sad interview I saw. Sad in a pathetic sort of way, I guess. Mm-hmm. Where it's like you had this round table discussion, right? And you had like guys like Toby Hooper and Wes Craven and all these people whom we lost a lot of, unfortunately. But they were all sitting in this round table, and they were with one of these newer guys like Eli Roth or somebody like that, right? And Eli Roth looked over to like Craven, Carpenter, whoever was there, and he basically said, wow, I feel honored to be here with you guys because you guys like invented the horror movie. And all those guys were looking at him and they were like, no, we didn't. All of us grew up on horror movies. We didn't invent shit. And I think that kind of sums it up, Yeah,
that sums it up. All right. We're getting close to the end, guys. I guess we didn't realize how long this was going to be.
Yeah.
So we're just going to try to wrap this up pretty soon here. The old joining the bandwagon. That's right.
God.
Individualism gets thrown out the lick. There's millions and millions of fans that love Halloween. I do too, so I'm in with the troops that love Halloween. I still like Halloween for my reasons as next as the next person likes Halloween for their reasons. So you can still have individualism in a universal love. Okay? The bandwagon jumpers are these people and that jump on board with something like a movie that gets some sort of half-life approval and then a chug, and now all of a sudden Halloween 3 is an underappreciated masterpiece, and how Halloween 3 is the best fucking one in the franchise.
Yeah, and it's like back in the day, everybody across the board
fucking hated that movie.
Like, that movie fucking sucks.
And that
Michael Myers is not even in that movie. Fuck that movie.
And that goes with that egotism stuff, that like, I gotta be special. I gotta champion a movie that no one else likes because they don't get it. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. It's like, fuck you. You're just being a child. You're really being like sophomoric and immature and self-obsessed and self-fucking. But really, you really, if you want to dig past that, it's because you don't have a really healthy sense of ego, and you're finding all these reasons to make yourself feel special. It doesn't work with horror stuff because horror is not real. Okay, they're movies.
Wait a minute. Hold on here, man. Are you actually telling me that all my childhood thoughts are bullshit and that Freddy Krueger doesn't exist? I'm done, man.
No. Love in horror movies. Love in horror movies is real. Love in horror is real. That's real. But horror movies aren't real. And if you're going to sit there and brag about the things that fucking, that you know, how this makes you special and how this makes you unique based on something that's not really concrete, then you're just grasping at straws here. Like, you just are, to me. And even the abstract stuff like joy and love and peace, that stuff you can't really fucking package in a box either. So it's hard to do it either or way, but horror movies really, they don't exist. They're just fun. They're escapist fantasy. They're spooks. They're chills. They're just fun. That's what they are. And,
it's like there's so much ego gratification going on in the fandom in general. It's like, the way I see it is, yes, you know all these directors, you know all these films.
Let me ask you this.
The question remains, is all this shit really going to matter after your fucking worm chow? No.
When you're on your fucking, maybe when you're taking your last gasp of breath before you fucking dirt on, you're going to think to yourself, man, I sure did know a lot about horror. And I knew more about directors and Italian films than the next person. I was special. I was a special fan.
Yeah.
Give me a break. The other thing when I think about the bandwagon jumpers is how all of a sudden Italian movies in the last 10 years or 12 years are like fucking...
I know, it's like back in like 2006, it's like people knew what Italian films were. I mean, they liked them and stuff. But you didn't have this like hero worship that happens nowadays where it's like, oh, they're the best movies of all.
And what we got last year was this new revival of pagan folk horror that somebody got hot on this fucking idea. There was a box set made of it, and all of a sudden you're going to probably see more movies like that made, and maybe more movies. And I don't mind the idea of it, but the idea is that people are just jumping on it and jumping on it and jumping on it and acting like it's theirs.
It seriously almost seems like the internet is killing any idea of individuality, because I swear to God, these people, some of these people are almost like automatons, and they pat each other on the back and they agree with each other, and it's just like, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
So, the Horror Outsider, we need to take about that, and we're going to talk about horror lifestyle, and we're going to close it up after that, because this was running way longer than we thought it was going to be. But so the Horror Outsider, that's right. The old horror, we talked about it earlier on, the old horror fan is the outsider. How no one in society is going to approve of the horror fan. Oh, woe is the horror fan. Give me a fucking break. fucking Obama, President Obama likes Blackula. Give me a fucking break about the fucking horror outsider, okay? Give me a break about that, okay?
That and their ridiculous.
Well,
like,
ex-President Obama.
Yeah, that and their ridiculous, like, non-existent parallel, or their nonsensical, non-existence parallel between them and the fucking Frankenstein monster. It's like, oh, Frankenstein monster represents the outsider in all of us. It's like, asshole motherfucker. When you were the goth kid who was picked on in high school, you might have been jammed into lockers. You might have had your head dunked in the toilet. You were never at any point in time chased by a bunch of fucking villagers with pitchforks and torches who wanted to kill your ass. It's not the same thing.
Now, going back to the punk fan, the punk outsider, going back to the punk outsider back in the day, that was dangerous depending on where you were.
Yeah.
So you would get maybe fucked up, you know. And the horror fan in the 80s, we talked about it, there was some danger to it. I mean, I wouldn't say danger, but there was some risk for being a horror fan. But there's no risk nowadays to be a horror fan. There is absolutely none. Okay?
No.
There isn't. You know?
Everything's nice and political correct now. Nobody picks on each other.
So
that's the theory, anyway.
Then you have horror as a lifestyle. So you have the outsider. Now you have the lifestyle, which is basically these people. And trust me, go to a horror convention. Go to Spooky Empire. We live in Florida. You go there, and all you see is these tattoo fucking parlors there. What the fuck do tattoos got to do with horror?
Well, you can get like Reagan from The Exorcist. Like,
yeah, not a fucking thing.
And it's just like fucking. You get Reagan from The Exorcist right there. And what it means is, like CM Punk said in his WWE documentary, if you get a fucking tattoo, it means more to you than it does to other people. Like, what?
So this idea of horror nowadays means
God.
You're vegan. You got some lip rings, some fucking wired glasses. You got tattoos. You have a political cause.
Usually
social justice,
leftist political cause.
You fucking these as what this is what's supposed to be like. And horror lifestyle, by the way, is that you have that you're into witchcraft, or you have little candles in your house.
Yeah, because you can't be a Christian and be a horror fan, because Christianity is mainstream religion, and it's a symbol of the patriarchy, because Jesus was a man. That's bad.
Well, and in horror, being a horror fan is mainstream.
Yeah.
Let's face it, it is. You're not special. You're not on the outside if you like horror movies. You're not. And if you think you are, just because you have a fucking lip ring and you like Pumpkinhead, you're fucking mistaking yourself. You're not.
Just because your jock stuck your ass in a locker, that they stick everybody in lockers. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, they stick everybody in lockers.
Well, anybody smaller than them, anyway.
And then there's a magazine that we used to read a lot called Rue Morgue. And Rue Morgue was always kind of a spotty magazine. Always kind of liked Fangoria better. I always liked Scary Monsters better. But Rue Morgue used to have some kind of interesting information in it.
It's spotty. It was spotty then.
It's horrible now.
It's unreadable now. Literally unreadable.
Because if you go through and read it, we're going to change gears here, because if you go through and read it, now the horror fan has to be social crusader. Now the horror fan's got to fucking push diversity in everybody's throats. What the fuck's that got to do with watching a horror movie? Well, nothing.
Being a leftist is thinking outside the box.
But it's not really thinking outside the box, because if you read enough of these magazines and you see enough of this garbage, you realize millions and millions of people think like this, so it's not really outside the box.
No, and the whole leftist thing has gone like freaking like corporate anyway, because you got like trans, like, and I realize this is off topic, but it kind of ties into it, is you got like trans endorsed beer and stuff like that. It's like, if you're a corporate entity, how can you be going against the fucking grain? That makes no sense. If you're corporate endorsed, you're the fucking mainstream. You're the literally definition of mainstream.
Well, if you're going to add diversity in movies, let's say you want to make a movie where the movie's basically about a gay person or gay people at a movie, just make the movie fucking good. That's all I ask. You don't have to put in all these social messages. It weighs down these movies. It weighs down the Hollywood movies, and it weighs down any movies because you're taking moral, philosophical kind of ideology and you're trying to shove it into a movie, and it doesn't work. Movies don't work like that.
Yeah,
and if they do come across like that, they always come across as preachy.
And I was going to say another thing. If you're going to do a gay movie, like, have your gay characters be cool. Don't make them woke. Don't make them assholes, which is kind of the same
Don't
thing.
make them victims.
And don't make them go around saying stupid stuff like fucking sexuality is fluid and shit like that. It's like...
Well, you know... I wouldn't mind seeing a cool, like, kick-ass gay fucking movie, like, gay horror movie. I would watch it, you know, but I don't need to be told what to think about diversity while I'm watching it. That's all I'm saying. Make them if you want. I think you should. But don't sit there and tell people how to think while they're watching your fucking movie.
And in other words, you can make a gay movie with gay characters, but you don't need a movie where it's almost like the filmmaker is sitting next to you the entire time. You have that feeling, and the filmmaker is basically doing this. Hey, the characters in this movie are gay. Hey, you're watching this? Are you paying attention? It's like... Nobody wants that.
Because in a way, when you're doing that, you're pimping these people out. You're selling them out. You're whoring them out for your agenda. And so that's not really respectful at all, really. Make them be human beings. And if that part of being a human being is being gay, we're cool with that. But just make sure that in your movie, you're not fucking saying to the fucking watcher, you need to agree with me. You need to understand this. Because movies do not work like that, in my opinion. That's a fundamental flaw directors have had for a long time, to really believe that if they put a message in their movie, that it's going to somehow persuade another person how to think. And a simple story is that Roger McGuinn was saying, for the Byrds, was saying that he thought back then that music was going to save the world and change the world. And he thought about it later on, and he goes, that's really kind of a ridiculous idea, because it doesn't. It doesn't.
Or like John Lennon said in '79 before he died, and he said essentially the dream is dead, because he realized that my music wasn't going to change shit. I was basically deluded.
As much as his ego says and imagine that this is how, in that song, which I absolutely find atrocious, like, the idea is okay, but come on now. Yeah. Did John Lennon really think that song was going to make, like, that was going to be like, hey, did you hear this John Lennon song? Let's ship it over to Vietnam. Maybe the fucking conflict will win. Fucking Lennon song. Come on now. So these are kind of the high points and the low points, and I'm sure we're going to piss some people off and whatever. But the point is, what we're trying to say is, like, if you like horror movies and you're a horror fan, you don't have to. You just could be yourself and just like what you like, dislike what you dislike. You don't have to carry some sort of, like, identity button with you saying I'm a horror fan, because nowadays when you put that button on and you say I'm a horror fan, it comes with all the bullshit that we talked about. And in a world full of bullshit, why don't we cut the bullshit down just a little bit?
Yeah, you do that, and you got Andrea Subicetti walking up to you and basically asking you what your political cause is. It's like, I don't have one. Leave me
Yeah.
alone. Leave me the fuck
Here's my
alone.
political clause. Yeah, but I don't want it to feel like we're trashing on people, and I definitely don't want fucking, calm down, you sensitive people. We're not bashing on gay people at all or anything like that. We're just
No,
saying.
I thought that
I
made
thought we
that
made that.
abundantly clear. And I'm not, and what I said about skinheads earlier, I'm not advocating for fucking skinheads. I'm not.
But these people are going to lose their shit out there.
Racist.
So
yeah, whatever.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. We're gonna wrap it up. So I don't. What are we gonna do for the next episode? What do you want to do on?
Oh God,
you want to do the golden cage?
No idea.
The golden age of collecting.
I did mention that, so we could do that.
Yeah, well, we're gonna do that, or we could do. Another thing I thought about doing is like necrophilia in films.
That would be an interesting one too.
So we might do one of those two, or we might do something completely different.
If we do the golden age in collecting, I think I'll title that video "The Great Fallacy."
So I just want to make this in closing. I just want to bring this up in closing. The first time I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the scene where Leatherface comes out, puts that girl on that hook, or was it a girl or a guy on the hook? Who was it?
It's a girl.
Yeah.
It's a girl in the first one, but in the remake, it's a guy because they had to make the remake a little more PC.
But they put the girl on the hook, and was it the guy that was in the meat freezer?
Yes.
And Leatherface looks out and then shuts that door, and there's that classic scene. And when you think about that scene, and you think about horror scenes in general, none of the great horror scenes, at least in my opinion, have anything to do with any of the bullshit we just talked about. They have nothing to do with that.
No.
So take out that carrot out of your ass and just enjoy horror. That's it for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One thing I was going to mention real quick, and this is kind of just a technical thing, but obviously we didn't mean all horror fans are assholes. And point in fact, when you see this video, it will probably have a thumbnail of a cosplayer from one of the conventions. I'm not sure which one yet. I got to figure that out. And I actually like cosplayers. I think cosplayers are cool. As a writer myself, I like anything that involves creativity. So... yeah. All
right.
That's it for me.
BD, SD, SKD. We're deuces. Deuces.